He doesn't belong here." That was the whisper that started a war at 30,000 feet. 17-year-old Jordan Banks sat quietly in seat 1A first class, wearing a vintage oversized hoodie and beat-up sneakers. To the wealthy passengers around him, he looked like an error in the system. But when a high society socialite decided she wanted his seat for her designer bags, the situation didn't just escalate, it exploded. Security was called. Cuffs were threatened. As they dragged the boy down the aisle, humiliated and silent, nobody knew the devastating secret he was holding back. They thought they were removing a nuisance. They didn't realize they were about to ground the entire airline. This is the story of how prejudice met the hardest, coldest wall of karma imaginable. The interior of the Boeing 737-300ER was a sanctuary of beige leather and ambient lighting, a sharp contrast to the biting November wind whipping around the tarmac at JFK International Airport. Flight 294 to London. Heathrow was fully booked, a tube of metal packed with weary travelers, business tycoons, and families dreading the 7-hour haul across the Atlantic. In the exclusive quiet of first class, Jordan Banks adjusted the noise-cancelling headphones over his ears. He was 17, with dark skin that seemed to absorb the soft cabin light and eyes that held a quiet, observant intelligence. He was dressed for comfort, not for status. His grey hoodie was frayed at the cuffs, his jeans were distressed, intentionally, though few here would give him the benefit of the doubt, and his sneakers were scuffed, limited edition Jordans that were worth more than the suit of the man sitting across the aisle. Jordan wasn't trying to be noticed. He sank deep into the lie-flat seat of 1A, the prime spot in the cabin, and pulled out a battered sketchbook. He began to draw, the charcoal pencil scratching rhythmically against the paper. He was anxious. Not about the flight, he had practically grown up on planes, but about what waited for him in London. Art school interviews. The pressure was immense. The cabin was filling up. The air smelled of expensive perfume and sanitizer. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, brittle, like glass breaking under a heel. Jordan didn't hear it at first through his music. "Excuse me. Boy." A manicured hand waved aggressively in his peripheral vision. Jordan pulled his headphones down around his neck and looked up. Standing over him was a woman who radiated money and impatience. She looked to be in her 50s, wearing a tweed Chanel jacket that probably cost a mid-sized sedan, and clutching a crocodile skin Hermes Birkin bag as if it were a holy relic. Her blonde hair was sprayed into an immovable helmet of perfection. This was Beatrice Holloway. She was the wife of a hedge fund manager, a woman who had never heard the word no without immediately demanding to speak to a manager. "Yes?" Jordan asked, his voice calm, though his heart did a little stutter. He knew this look. He had seen it in department stores when he browsed too long, and in hotel lobbies when he waited for his father. It was the look that said, "You are in the wrong place." "You are in my seat," Beatrice stated, not asking but declaring a fact. She gestured with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Economy is back that way. Way back." Jordan looked at his boarding pass, which was sitting on the console next to his orange juice. "I don't think so, Mum. Seat 1A. That's me." Beatrice let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. She turned to the passengers behind her, seeking an audience. "Can you believe this? He thinks he's funny." She turned back to Jordan, her face hardening. "Listen to me. I booked 1A. I always book 1A. There has been a mistake. You clearly picked up a discarded ticket, or you're trying to pull a fast one for social media. Now get up before I call someone." "You can call someone," Jordan said, his voice steady, though his grip on the sketchbook tightened. "But this is my seat." Beatrice's face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. She didn't argue further. She simply turned and snapped her fingers at a passing flight attendant. "You. Yes, you. Come here, immediately." The flight attendant, a tall man with a tightly gelled side part and a name tag that read Gregory, hurried over. Gregory prided himself on the exclusivity of his cabin. He catered to CEOs and celebrities. He did not like disruptions, and he certainly didn't like the look of the teenager in 1A. "What seems to be the problem, Mrs. Halloway?" Gregory asked, his voice dripping with professional obsequiousness. He recognized her. She was a platinum member, frequent flyer, big tipper if you played by her rules. "The problem," Beatrice hissed, pointing a diamond-encrusted finger at Jordan, "is that this child is refusing to vacate my seat. He's clearly snuck in from coach while boarding was chaotic. I want him removed, now. I have delicate items in my bag that need the space." Gregory turned his gaze to Jordan. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by a cold, bureaucratic suspicion. He took in the hoodie, the headphones, the sketchbook. He made a snap judgment, the kind that ruins lives. "Sir," Gregory said, his tone dropping an octave. "May I see your boarding pass?" Jordan held it up. Gregory snatched it from his hand, scanning it with a frown. It said 1A. It said Jordan Banks. It looked valid. But Gregory knew that glitches happened, or fake apps. Kids these days could forge anything on a smartphone. "This doesn't look right," Gregory lied. He didn't know if it was wrong, but it felt wrong. "The system shows 1A is reserved for a VIP, and frankly, you don't look like a VIP." "I have a ticket," Jordan said, his voice rising slightly. "I scanned it at the gate. The green light beeped. I'm sitting here." "Don't raise your voice at me," Gregory snapped, stepping closer, invading Jordan's personal space. "This isn't a school bus. This is a transatlantic flight. Now, Mrs. Halloway is a priority passenger. If there is a double booking, standard protocol dictates we prioritize status, and I see you have no status on your file." Jordan didn't have status on his file because he flew on a dependent pass, usually hidden from the standard manifest view unless you dug deeper. But Gregory didn't dig. He just saw a kid who didn't fit the aesthetic. "I'm not moving," Jordan said, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks. Passengers were staring now. A man in 2B was filming with his phone. "I paid for this. Well, my dad did. It's my seat." "Oh, his daddy paid for it," Beatrice mocked, rolling her eyes. "Probably with a stolen credit card. Gregory, are you going to let him insult me like this? He's aggressive. I feel unsafe." That was the trigger word. Unsafe. Gregory straightened up, buttoning his blazer. "Sir, I am going to ask you one last time to gather your belongings and move to the rear of the aircraft where we can sort this out. If you refuse, I will be forced to classify this as a security threat." "I'm not a threat," Jordan protested, holding up his hands. "I'm just sitting here." "That's it," Gregory said, pulling out his radio. "Captain, we have a non-compliant passenger in first class, refusing crew instructions, potentially hostile, requesting gate security immediately." Jordan froze. The captain... He looked toward the cockpit door, barely 10 feet away. It was reinforced and locked. He opened his mouth to say something, to drop the name that would end this instantly, but pride stopped him. "No," he thought. "I shouldn't have to use his name just to be treated like a human being. I have a ticket." "You're making a mistake," Jordan said quietly. "The only mistake," Beatrice sneered, adjusting her pearl necklace, "was letting you through the gate." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted from awkward to hostile in seconds. The air felt heavy, charged with the static of injustice. While they waited for security, Gregory stood over Jordan like a prison warden, blocking the aisle so Jordan couldn't try anything. Beatrice Halloway had taken the seat across the aisle, 1D, temporarily, but she kept glaring at Jordan, tapping her foot impatiently. "I have a connection in London," she announced loudly to no one in particular. "A charity gala. If I am late because of this delinquent, I will be suing the airline." From a few rows back, a voice spoke up. It was a young woman in business attire. "Hey, he showed you his ticket. Why don't you just check the computer again?" Gregory whipped around. "Ma'am, please do not interfere with flight crew duties. This is a security matter now." "It's only a security matter because you made it one," the woman argued. "He's just a kid." "He is a disruptive passenger refusing crew orders," Gregory recited robotically. He looked back at Jordan. "You see what you're doing? You're disturbing the entire cabin. Shame on you." Jordan stared out the window. He was shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was burning his throat. He thought about his dad, who had worked 20 years to get to the left seat of a wide-body jet. His dad, who had taught him to be respectful, to dress well, to keep his head down. Keep your head down, Jordan. Don't give them a reason. He had kept his head down. He had done everything right, and it didn't matter. 2 minutes later, the heavy thud of boots echoed on the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority officers boarded the plane. They were large men, loaded down with tactical gear, their faces grim. They saw Gregory standing in the aisle and Beatrice pointing an accusatory finger. "That's him," Beatrice said, pointing at Jordan as if he were holding a weapon. "The one in the hoodie. He threatened me." "I didn't threaten anyone," Jordan cried out, standing up. "Sit down!" The lead officer, Officer Miller, barked, his hand resting instinctively on his belt. "Sit down and keep your hands where I can see them." Jordan sank back into the leather seat, his hands trembling as he placed them on his knees. "I have a ticket," he whispered. "It's right there." Officer Miller ignored the ticket. He looked at Gregory. "What's the situation?" "Subject is refusing to vacate a seat he isn't authorized for," Gregory reported, embellishing freely. "He became aggressive with Mrs. Halloway, used profanity, and refused my direct orders to move to the galley for verification. We need him off. The captain wants him off." That was a lie. The captain, Captain Michael Banks, hadn't said a word. He was busy with pre-flight checks, likely unaware of the specifics of the squabble happening behind the reinforced door. He just knew the flight attendant had called in a disruptive passenger and trusted his crew to handle it. "All right, son," Officer Miller said, stepping into the first-class pod. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Grab your bag. You're coming with us." "But I didn't do anything," Jordan pleaded, tears pricking his eyes now. The humiliation was total. "Check the manifest. Please just check the manifest properly." "We'll check everything outside," the second officer said, pulling Jordan's arm. "Right now, you are delaying a federal flight. That's a felony if you push it. Let's go." Jordan looked around the cabin, searching for an ally. The woman who had defended him earlier looked away, intimidated by the police presence. The man filming was still filming, zooming in on Jordan's face. Beatrice Halloway was smiling. It was a small, tight, victorious smile. "Up," Miller commanded, grabbing Jordan by the hoodie and the upper arm. He hauled the boy out of the seat. Jordan stumbled into the aisle. His sketchbook fell to the floor, sliding under the seat. "My book," Jordan said, reaching for it. "Leave it," the officer snapped. "Move." They marched him down the aisle, not back toward economy, but forward, toward the exit door. The walk of shame. Every eye was on him. People in business class craned their necks to see the criminal being escorted off. "Drug mule?" someone whispered. "Probably drunk," another guessed. Jordan kept his eyes on the floor. He felt the officer's hands heavy on his shoulders. He felt the cold air from the open cabin door. As they reached the door, Gregory, the flight attendant, let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, officers. I apologize for the delay. We can close up now." "Wait." The voice was deep, resonant, and commanded absolute silence. It didn't come from the passengers. It came from the cockpit. The flight deck door clicked and swung open. Standing there was the captain. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with greying hair at the temples and 4 gold stripes on his epaulets. He held his cap in his hand. He looked authoritative, calm, and currently very confused. Captain Michael Banks looked at the commotion in the galley. He looked at the police officers. He looked at Beatrice Halloway, who was busy fluffing her scarf in the background. And then he looked at the criminal they were holding. The colour drained from the captain's face, replaced instantly by a look of thunderous recognition. "Jordan," the captain said, his voice cutting through the hum of the auxiliary power unit. The officers stopped. Gregory froze, his hand halfway to the door control. Jordan looked up, his eyes red. "Hey, Dad." The silence that followed was louder than a jet engine. Captain Michael Banks stepped fully out of the cockpit, his presence filling the cramped galley space. He didn't look like a pilot anymore. He looked like a father who had just walked in on someone hurting his child. "Officer," Captain Banks said, his voice dangerously low, "take your hands off him." Officer Miller blinked, confused. "Captain, this passenger was disruptive. Your flight crew reported—" "I said," Banks interrupted, stepping closer, "take your hands off my son." The grip on Jordan's arm vanished instantly. The officers took a synchronized step back, looking from the boy in the hoodie to the man with the 4 stripes. The resemblance was undeniable now that they were standing together. The same eyes, the same jawline. Gregory, the flight attendant, looked as if he had swallowed a block of ice. His face went from smug authority to sheer, unadulterated panic. "Your son?" he squeaked. "My son," Captain Banks repeated, his eyes locking onto Gregory's. "Jordan Banks, who is listed on the manifest as a dependent, non-revenue positive space passenger, in seat 1A, which I assigned to him personally for his birthday." Beatrice Halloway, who had been watching with glee, suddenly stopped arranging her bag. She looked up, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "But," Beatrice stammered, He was in my seat. I demanded." Captain Banks turned his gaze to her. It was a look that could have frozen aviation fuel. "Mum, I am the pilot in command of this aircraft. I know exactly who is sitting where. Seat 1A belongs to Jordan. You are in 4F. I saw the seat map this morning." "There must be a mistake," Beatrice shrieked, her voice rising an octave, trying to regain control of the narrative. "He looks like a thug. He was aggressive. He threatened me." "Jordan," Captain Banks said, not looking away from Beatrice, "did you threaten this woman?" "No, Dad," Jordan said, rubbing his arm where the officer had grabbed him. "I had my headphones on. She came over screaming that I stole her seat. Then he," Jordan pointed at Gregory, "told me I didn't belong here and called the cops." Captain Banks turned back to Gregory. The flight attendant was trembling. "Gregory," the captain said, his voice deceptively calm, "how long have you flown with me?" "3 years, Captain," Gregory stuttered. "In 3 years, have I ever given you reason to doubt my judgment?" "No, sir." "Then why?" Banks asked, stepping into Gregory's personal space. "Did you call armed security on a 17-year-old boy with a valid ticket without consulting me? Why did you assume he was a threat? Why didn't you check the manifest properly?" Mrs. Halloway was very insistent," Gregory tried to deflect. "And he didn't look like a first-class passenger, sir. I made a judgment call." "You judged him based on his hoodie and his skin," Captain Banks said, his voice hard. "Don't use the word safety to cover up your bias." The captain turned to the police officers. "Gentlemen, my son is not going anywhere. However, we do have a disruptive passenger situation that needs to be resolved." Officer Miller nodded slowly, understanding the shift in power. "Yes, Captain. Who is the disruptive passenger?" Captain Banks pointed a steady finger at Beatrice Halloway. "Her!" Beatrice gasped. "Me? Do you know who I am? My husband owns—" "I don't care if your husband owns the Atlantic Ocean," Captain Banks cut her off. "You verbally assaulted a minor, you disrupted the pre-flight procedure, and you attempted to coerce my crew into removing a paying passenger based on nothing but your own entitlement. You are a safety risk to this flight." "This is ridiculous," Beatrice screamed, standing up and grabbing her Birkin bag. "I am a platinum flyer. I will have your badge. I will have all your jobs." "You are welcome to try from the terminal," Captain Banks said. He looked at the officers. "Remove her. And remove him," he pointed at Gregory. Gregory's knees buckled. "Captain, please. I didn't know. I can't be offloaded. I need this flight hours." "You are unfit for duty," Captain Banks said coldly. "You escalated a non-event into a security crisis because you couldn't be bothered to do your job. You jeopardized the safety of my son. Get off my plane." Beatrice was already screaming as the officers approached her. "Don't touch me. This is reverse racism. This is a conspiracy." "Ma'am, let's go," Officer Miller said, his patience gone. He grabbed her arm with significantly less gentleness than he had used on Jordan. As Beatrice was dragged down the aisle, kicking and screaming obscenities, the entire first-class cabin watched in stunned silence. The man who had been filming was now live-streaming the whole thing. Gregory, looking like a man marching to the gallows, grabbed his flight bag and followed the police. His head hung low. Captain Banks put a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah," Jordan said, taking a deep breath. "Just embarrassed." "Don't be," his dad said, loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. "You handled yourself better than anyone else in this cabin." The captain turned to the rest of the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We will be deboarding the disruptive passenger and replacing the crew member. We will be underway shortly. I suggest we all use this time to reflect on how we treat one another." He looked directly at the man in 2B who had been filming. "And sir? Make sure you post that." The cabin doors didn't close immediately. The fallout was just beginning. The video was already uploading, and by the time the wheels of Flight 294 lifted off the tarmac, the internet was already sharpening its pitchforks. But the real storm wasn't in the sky. It was waiting for Beatrice and Gregory on the ground. The jet bridge retracted, and the heavy cabin door thudded shut, sealing the outside world away. But inside the tube of Flight 294, the air was still vibrating with the aftershocks of the confrontation. Captain Michael Banks didn't immediately retreat to the flight deck. He stood at the front of the cabin for a moment longer, his gaze sweeping over the remaining first-class passengers. These were people who had paid thousands of dollars for comfort and exclusivity. Yet not one of them had spoken up when a teenager was being manhandled. He looked at the woman who had earlier suggested Gregory check the computer. She looked down at her lap, suddenly finding the in-flight safety card fascinating. He looked at the man in 2B, the one who had filmed the incident. "What is your name, sir?" Captain Banks asked. The man lowered his phone, looking a bit sheepish but also excited. "Henderson. David Henderson." "Mr. Henderson?" Banks said, his voice grave. "You have footage of the entire interaction?" "Yes, Captain. Everything from when she started screaming to when you showed up." "Good," Banks nodded. "Keep it safe. The airline's legal team might try to say the cameras were malfunctioning. The truth is often the first casualty in these reports. With that, the captain turned to his son. Jordan was back in seat 1A, holding his sketchbook like a shield. He looked smaller now, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind the hollow exhaustion of humiliation. "I have to go fly this plane," Michael said softly, leaning down so only Jordan could hear. "We're going to get you to London. We're going to get you to that interview. Are you good?" Jordan looked up. He saw the worry lines around his dad's eyes, lines that hadn't been there a few years ago. "I'm good, Dad. Go do your job." "I'm sorry, Jordan. It's not your fault." "It is," Michael corrected him. "It's the world's fault, and I couldn't protect you from it." He squeezed Jordan's shoulder one last time, then straightened up. He signaled to the replacement flight attendant, a woman named Sarah who had been pulled up from the economy crew to cover Gregory's spot. She looked nervous but kind. "Take care of him, Sarah," Michael ordered. "With my life, Captain," she whispered. Captain Banks entered the cockpit. The bolt slid home. As the plane pushed back from the gate, the atmosphere in first class was suffocating. Usually, this was the time for champagne and warm nuts. Today, it was a wake. Jordan opened his sketchbook. His hand was shaking slightly, making the lines of his drawing waver. He tried to focus on the charcoal shading, but he could feel the eyes on him. Finally, the woman in 3A, an elderly British lady with kind eyes, who had been asleep during the start of the altercation, leaned forward. "Young man," she whispered. Jordan braced himself for another complaint. "Yes?" "I am terribly sorry," she said. "I woke up just as they were dragging that awful woman away. You handled yourself with remarkable grace." "Thank you," Jordan murmured. "What are you drawing?" Jordan hesitated, then turned the pad. It was a sketch of the airport terminal, but distorted, the lines sharp and jagged, capturing the anxiety and the rush of the crowd. "I'm going to art school interviews," he admitted. "Or I hope to." "You have a gift," she said warmly. "Don't let ugly people ruin beautiful things." It was a small kindness, but it was enough to lower Jordan's heart rate. As the engines roared to life and the plane began its taxi, Jordan put his headphones back on. He didn't play music this time. He just wanted the silence. But while the plane climbed into the peaceful stratosphere, a digital bomb was detonating on the ground. JFK Terminal 4 is a sprawling glass city, but the Port Authority holding room is a windowless concrete box designed to drain the ego out of anyone unfortunate enough to sit inside it. Beatrice Halloway was pacing the small room like a caged tiger. Her Birkin bag sat on the metal table, looking ridiculously out of place next to the bolted-down chairs. Gregory sat in the corner, his head in his hands. He had been stripped of his ID badge. His uniform blazer was unbuttoned, his tie loose. He knew, with the fatalistic certainty of a seasoned industry worker, that he was done. "Gross misconduct," was the phrase the station manager had used. "This is kidnapping!" Beatrice shrieked at the empty room. She kicked the door. "I want my lawyer! I want my phone!" Officer Miller opened the door. He looked tired. "Mrs. Halloway, you've been processed. You're not under arrest, but you are banned from the flight, and the airline has flagged your profile. You're free to go, pending the investigation." "Free to go," Beatrice scoffed. "I'm in New York. I'm supposed to be in London. Do you know how much that ticket cost?" "That's between you and the airline, Mum. Here are your belongings." She snatched her phone from the plastic bin. "I am going to destroy that man," she muttered, her fingers flying across the screen. "Captain Banks, I'll have his license. And that brat." She dialed a number. "Richard," she barked into the phone. "Richard, you will not believe what just happened to me." Richard Halloway, a senior partner at the high-powered law firm Sterling and O'Connell, was currently in a meeting in Manhattan. He answered the phone with a weary sigh. Beatrice's calls were rarely bearers of good news. "Beatrice, I'm in with the client. What is it?" "I was thrown off the plane, Richard. A pilot, some affirmative action hire, no doubt, assaulted me. He and his delinquent son set me up. I'm at JFK. Send the car, and get the legal team ready. We are suing Vanguard Airlines for emotional distress, breach of contract, and discrimination." Richard pinched the bridge of his nose. "Beatrice, slow down. What do you mean the pilot assaulted you? He yelled at me. He humiliated me in front of first class. He chose his son over a paying customer." "His son?" Richard paused. "Why was his son on the plane?" "He was stealing my seat. Seat 1A. It was a conspiracy, Richard." "Beatrice," Richard said, a cold dread settling in his stomach. "Did you make a scene?" "I demanded my rights." "Oh, God," Richard whispered. "Please tell me nobody filmed it." "Who cares? Let them film. I'm the victim here." At that exact moment, Richard's assistant, a young paralegal named Sarah, knocked frantically on the glass door of the conference room. She was holding an iPad, her face pale. Richard waved her in. "Hold on, Beatrice." "Mr. Halloway," Sarah whispered. "You need to see this. It's trending on X, and TikTok, and Reddit." She placed the iPad on the table. The video was entitled "Karen Tries to Kick Pilot's Son Out of First Class. Gets Wrecked by Captain Dad." Richard watched in horror. The video was crystal clear. It showed Jordan sitting quietly. It showed Beatrice screaming. It showed her calling him a boy. It showed her snapping her fingers at the flight attendant. And then, the climax, the cockpit door opening, the revelation. "Take your hands off my son." The internet was eating it up. The view count was climbing vertically. Aviation geek. The way the captain walked out. Chills. That's a father right there. Justice. For Jordan. Did she really say he doesn't belong here? In 2024? Identify her immediately. Eat the rich. Look at that bag. That's a 20K bag, and she's treating a kid like trash. Karma is coming. Travel Pro. That FA is toast. Never assume a non-rev isn't VIP. Richard Halloway watched his wife being dragged down the aisle, screaming about reverse racism. He closed his eyes. He knew exactly what was about to happen. His firm represented high-profile clients who valued discretion above all else. His wife had just become the face of entitlement and racism for the entire English-speaking world. "Beatrice?" Richard said into the phone, his voice icy. "Are you listening to me, Richard? I want to sue." "You're not suing anyone, Beatrice," Richard said. "You're going to get in the car, you are going to come home, and you are going to delete all your social media accounts. Now. How dare you? Beatrice, you are trending. There are 3 million views in 20 minutes. Do you have any idea what you've done?" On the other side of the call, Beatrice stood in the cold, fluorescent light of the arrivals hall. She lowered the phone, finally checking her notifications. Instagram, 999+ notifications. Twitter, 999+ notifications. She clicked on her latest post, a photo of her champagne in the lounge before the flight, captioned, "London Calling. Luxury Life." The comments were pouring in at a rate of 10 per second. "Is this the lady from the plane?" "Racist." "You owe that kid an apology. Hope you enjoyed the no-fly list." "Daddy, chill." For the first time in her life, Beatrice Halloway felt a true, genuine spike of fear. It wasn't the fear of physical danger. It was the fear of social death. Meanwhile, in the break room of the Port Authority building, Gregory was staring at his own phone. He wasn't looking at comments. He was looking at his email. Subject: Notice of immediate suspension. From Vanguard Airlines, HR Dear Gregory. Effective immediately. You are suspended pending an internal investigation regarding the incident on Flight 294. Please surrender your badge and uniform. Do not speak to the press. Gregory dropped the phone. He had 40,000 tolls in credit card debt. He had a mortgage. He had defined his entire personality by his job and the status it gave him over others. He looked across the room at Beatrice, who was now frantically typing on her phone, trying to delete comments. "You," Gregory said, his voice trembling. Beatrice looked up. "Excuse me." "You did this." Gregory stood up, his face twisted with misery. "I listened to you. I trusted you because you were platinum, and you cost me my life." "Don't speak to me, you incompetent servant," Beatrice spat back, though her voice lacked its usual venom. She was distracted, terrified. "I hope they ban you for life," Gregory said, grabbing his bag. "I hope you never fly again." He walked out into the cold New York air, leaving Beatrice alone with her vibrating phone. But the real twist wasn't just the viral video. It was who had seen the video. In a penthouse in London, the Dean of Admissions for the Royal Academy of Arts was scrolling through his feed during his evening tea. He stopped on the video. He watched the quiet dignity of the boy in the hoodie. He saw the sketchbook slide across the floor. He paused the video and zoomed in on the sketchbook. He recognized the style. It was raw, emotive. He picked up his phone and called the admissions office. "Get me the file on a Jordan Banks," the dean said. "He's coming in for an interview tomorrow. I want to conduct this one personally." The Karma train had left the station, and it had no brakes. The flight to London was smooth, but for Jordan it felt like a blur. He slept fitfully, waking up every time the cart rattled, thinking it was the police coming back. When they landed at Heathrow, the change in atmosphere was palpable. Usually, the pilot leaves the cockpit last. But today, Captain Banks stood at the door of the plane as the passengers deplaned. He wasn't there to say goodbye to them. He was there to stand next to his son. As the passengers filed out, many couldn't look the captain in the eye. The shame was collective. They had witnessed bullying and done nothing. When they reached the terminal, a Vanguard Airlines representative was waiting, a woman in a sharp navy suit, holding a clipboard. "Captain Banks," she said, looking stressed. "Jordan, the airline has arranged a private car for you. There is some press outside." "Press?" Jordan asked, shrinking into his hoodie. "The video has 20 million views, Jordan," his dad said grimly, checking his phone. "It's on CNN." "I don't want to talk to them," Jordan said. "You don't have to. We're going straight to the hotel, then to your interview." They were ushered out a side door, bypassing the wall of paparazzi that had gathered at international arrivals. The car ride was silent. Jordan stared at the rainy London streets, clutching his portfolio. "Dad," Jordan said, "maybe I shouldn't go to the interview. I'm tired, and if they know who I am, they might just pity me." "Jordan," Michael said, turning in his seat, "you didn't get that interview because of me. You got it because you're talented. What happened on that plane? That's noise. Your art, that's the signal. Don't let the noise drown out the signal." 2 hours later, Jordan stood in the imposing hallway of the Royal Academy. He had changed into a clean shirt and slacks, but he kept his sneakers. They were him. He was called into a room that smelled of turpentine and old wood. Behind a large oak table sat 3 people, 2 professors and the dean, a man named Alistair Sterling, no relation to the law firm, but a man of equal stature. "Mr. Banks," Dean Sterling said, peering over his spectacles. "Please, sit." Jordan sat. He opened his portfolio. He braced himself for the usual questions about technique and history. "Before we look at your work," the dean said, folding his hands, "I must ask, the charcoal sketch you were working on yesterday, the one that fell on the floor, do you have it?" Jordan blinked. "Yes, sir. But it's unfinished. It's messy. May I see it?" Jordan hesitated, then flipped to the back of his sketchbook. He tore out the page he had drawn on the plane, the jagged, anxious lines of the terminal, the claustrophobic perspective of the seat. He slid it across the table. The dean looked at it for a long time. He passed it to the other professors. They whispered. "You captured the feeling of entrapment perfectly," the dean said softly. "It is not merely a drawing of an airport. It is a drawing of how it feels to be unwanted in a space you have a right to occupy." Jordan felt a lump in his throat. I guess so. "Mr. Banks," the dean continued, "we saw the video. We know what happened. But we do not admit students based on viral sympathy. We admit them based on their ability to translate the human experience into a visual medium." The dean tapped the drawing. "This," he said, "is the human experience. It is raw. It is real." He looked up at Jordan. "Most students spend 4 years trying to find their voice. You already have yours. The question is, are you brave enough to use it?" Jordan thought about Beatrice. He thought about Gregory. He thought about the silence of the other passengers. "Yes," Jordan said, his voice firming up. "I am." "Good," the dean smiled. "Then let's talk about your scholarship." While Jordan was finding his future in London, Beatrice Halloway was returning to a past that was rapidly crumbling. She had been forced to book a seat on a different airline to get back to New York, economy class, middle seat, near the lavatory. It was the only ticket available on short notice. For 7 hours, she sat with her knees pressed against the plastic tray table, sandwiched between a backpacker who hadn't showered in days and a crying toddler. Every time she tried to close her eyes, she saw the captain's face. Every time she opened them, she saw passengers looking at their phones, giggling. She was paranoid that they were watching her video. They probably were. When she finally landed at JFK, she expected her driver, Thomas, to be waiting at the curb with the Mercedes S-Class. Instead, she found a text message. "Mr. Halloway has instructed me not to pick you up. Please take a taxi." Beatrice stood on the curb, rain matting her expensive hair, and screamed into the void. She hailed a yellow cab, the vinyl seats smelling of stale smoke, and gave her address, a sprawling estate in the Hamptons. When she arrived, the gates were closed. She punched in the code. Access denied. She buzzed the intercom. "Richard, open this gate. It's me." The gate clicked open, but the front door of the house remained shut. Standing on the porch was Richard Halloway. He wasn't wearing his usual welcoming smile. He was wearing a suit, and standing next to him was a man Beatrice recognized, Arthur Pendleton, the managing partner of Sterling and O'Connell. "Richard," Beatrice said, dropping her bags. "What is going on? Why are the gates locked?" "Come inside, Beatrice," Richard said, his voice flat. "We need to talk. In the study." The study was cold. On the desk lay a stack of printed papers. Beatrice recognized the logos: the New York Times, the Daily Mail, CNN. "You have been busy," Arthur said, sliding a newspaper toward her. The headline read, "High Society Hate. Partner's wife goes viral in racist airplane tirade." "It's libel," Beatrice insisted, though her voice wavered. "They edited the video." "They didn't edit anything," Richard snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "I watched the raw footage, Beatrice. Everyone has. Do you know who Vanguard Airlines uses for their corporate litigation?" Beatrice blinked. "No." "They use us," Arthur said quietly. "Or rather, they did. Until this morning. Vanguard Airlines fired our firm at 9 a.m. They cited a conflict of interest regarding their values. That account was worth $12 million a year. Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. I can fix it. I'll apologize. It's too late, Richard said. He looked at his wife with a mixture of pity and disgust. The board met an hour ago. They gave me a choice. I can keep my position as senior partner, or I can keep you. I cannot keep both. Beatrice laughed nervously. Richard, don't be dramatic. We've been married for 20 years. Richard picked up a folder from the desk and handed it to her. It wasn't a love letter. It was a petition for divorce. You have become a liability, Beatrice. My reputation is in tatters because of your entitlement. I warned you. I told you to stop treating people like dirt. You didn't listen. You're kicking me out? She whispered. The prenup is clear, Richard said, turning his back to look out the window. Infidelity or gross public embarrassment resulting in financial loss. You checked the second box, darling. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. The driver will take you to a hotel. Beatrice Holloway collapsed into the leather chair she had picked out herself. She had lost her seat in first class, and in doing so, she had lost her seat at the table of her entire life. Karma didn't just hunt the big game, it went after the enablers too. Gregory sat in his small apartment in Queens, staring at his uniform hanging on the door. It was the only thing he had ever been proud of. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Your profile has been viewed by 2,400 people today. He didn't open it. He knew what the messages said. He had been doxxed. People had found his high school yearbook photos. They had found his old tweets. He had a meeting with the union rep that afternoon. He put on a cheap suit and took the subway. The meeting was short. There's nothing we can do, Greg, the rep said, not making eye contact. You violated 3 core safety protocols. You targeted a dependent of a captain. You failed to verify the manifest, and you did it all on camera. If we fight this, the airline releases the internal audio from the flight deck. You don't want that. So I'm fired. Terminated with cause, meaning no severance. And Greg? The rep sighed. Vanguard shares a do not hire list with the other major carriers. It's standard for security risks. You're blacklisted. But flying is all I know, Gregory pleaded. I've done this for 10 years. Then you should have learned the first rule of the job, the rep said, closing the file. Every passenger is a person. You treated that kid like a problem. Now, you're the problem. 6 months later, a passenger on a budget bus line from New Jersey to Philadelphia would snap a photo of their driver. He looked familiar. He looked tired. He was checking tickets with a scowl. The caption read, "Isn't this the guy from the plane video? Life comes at you fast." 1 year later, Soho, New York City. The gallery on West Broadway was usually a quiet sanctuary of white walls and hushed whispers, reserved for the abstract wanderings of established European masters. Tonight, however, it was vibrating with a kinetic energy that spilled out onto the cobblestone streets. A velvet rope held back a line that wrapped around the corner, a mix of high-fashion elites, art students in thrifted layers, and even uniformed airline pilots who had come to pay their respects. Above the entrance, a stark, minimalist banner snapped in the autumn breeze. Jordan Banks, Turbulence. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne, warm cedar, and the metallic tang of chilled champagne. But unlike the stifling atmosphere of Flight 294 a year ago, this space felt electric. It was a celebration of voice, of presence, and of reclaiming space. Jordan Banks stood near the center of the room. He had filled out in the last year, the soft edges of boyhood hardening into the jawline of a young man. He wasn't wearing the grey hoodie today. He wore a bespoke black blazer, cut sharp to fit his shoulders, over a simple white t-shirt. But on his feet, he still wore those scuffed, limited edition Jordans. A silent nod to the boy who had been judged for them. He watched the crowd move through his life's work. The collection was a series of large-scale charcoal and graphite pieces, raw and aggressive, capturing the modern isolation of travel. There was The Gatekeeper, a dark, swirling sketch of a flight attendant's uniform that looked hollow, like a ghost was wearing it. There was Economy of Soul, depicting a sea of faceless passengers looking at screens, ignoring a crying child. But the crowd was gathered 10 deep around the centerpiece. It was a massive canvas, 12 feet tall, titled simply 1A. The drawing was a masterpiece of perspective. It was viewed from the vantage point of a seat, looking up at a looming, distorted figure of a woman with a blurred, screaming face. Her hands were claws, reaching down, but the focal point wasn't the fear. It was the light, a sharp, blinding beam of white cut through the darkness from the top left corner, the cockpit door opening. In that light stood a silhouette, tall and unshakable. "It's breathtaking," a voice said beside him. Jordan turned to see Alistair Sterling, the Dean of the Royal Academy, holding a glass of sparkling water. "You've managed to turn a moment of humiliation into a monument of dignity, Jordan." "I didn't want it to be about her," Jordan said quietly, his eyes scanning the crowd for his father. "I wanted it to be about the rescue. And you succeeded. The critics are calling it the most important debut of the decade. The New York Times called it a visual indictment of class warfare." Jordan smiled faintly. "I just wanted to draw, sir. And that is why you are dangerous," Sterling chuckled, "because you tell the truth without shouting." Across the room, Captain Michael Banks was holding court. He looked regal in his dress uniform. He had come straight from a flight from Tokyo to make the opening. He was surrounded by a group of investors and collectors, but his eyes kept darting back to his son. The pride radiating from him was so potent it was almost tangible. A woman with a Vanity Fair press badge cornered the captain. "Captain Banks, looking at this painting, how does it feel to be the hero of the art world's biggest story?" Michael shook his head, his expression sobering. "I'm not the hero. I just opened a door. My son. He's the one who had to sit in the dark and wait. He's the one who turned that darkness into this light. I'm just the guy who flies the plane." He excused himself and walked over to Jordan, placing a heavy, reassuring hand on his shoulder. The same shoulder the police officer had grabbed. "You okay?" Michael asked. "Yeah," Jordan exhaled, the tension leaving his frame. "It's a lot." "It's yours," Michael said. "You earned every inch of this floor space. Nobody can move you now." As they stood there, a flash of movement near the VIP section caught Jordan's eye. A tall, silver-haired man was shaking hands with the gallery owner, handing over a platinum credit card to purchase The Gatekeeper. It was Richard Halloway. Jordan stiffened. "Dad, look." Michael followed his gaze, his eyes narrowed. "Do you want me to have him removed? I can call security. It would be poetic." Jordan watched Richard Halloway, a man whose wife had tried to erase Jordan's existence, now paying $50,000 to own a piece of Jordan's soul. "No," Jordan said, a small ironic smile touching his lips. "Let him buy it. Let him hang it in his house. Every time he looks at it, he'll know exactly who beat him. That's better than kicking him out." Michael laughed, a deep, rich sound. "You're a better man than me, son." Meanwhile, on the other side of the East River, the contrast could not have been more violent. In a basement studio apartment in Queens, the air smelled of damp drywall and cat food. A single fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, casting a sickly green pallor over the room. Beatrice Halloway sat on a futon that had seen better decades. She was wearing a bathrobe that was once white, but was now a dingy grey. Her hair, usually a helmet of blonde perfection, was grown out, showing 3 inches of stark grey roots. She held a phone with a cracked screen, tapping furiously at the refreshing feed. She was watching the live stream of the gallery opening. She saw the champagne. She saw the flashes of the paparazzi cameras. She saw the way the light hit the cheekbones of the boy she had called a thug. He looked like a prince. And then the camera panned. She gasped, dropping the phone onto the stained carpet. On the screen, in high definition, was Richard. Her Richard. The man who had cut off her credit cards, locked her out of the Hamptons estate, and erased her from his life within 24 hours of the incident. He was smiling. He was shaking the captain's hand. He was buying the art. "Traitor," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse. You traitor." She scrambled to pick up the phone. She wanted to scream. She wanted to type. She logged into her anonymous burner account, her 4th one this week. She began to type a comment on the live stream. "This art is trash. The boy is a fraud. He provoked error. Your account has been suspended for violating our community guidelines on harassment." Beatrice stared at the message. She tried to create a new account. IP address blocked. She threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud. She looked around her prison. On the small laminate table sat her dinner, a cup of instant noodles, and a final notice from the electric company. Her Birkin bag, the catalyst of her destruction, sat in the corner. She had tried to sell it months ago, only to be told by 3 different pawn shops that it was a super fake. A counterfeit Richard had bought her years ago to shut her up. She wasn't just broke. She was a fraud. She walked to the tiny window that looked out onto an alleyway. High above, through the slice of sky between the buildings, she saw the blinking lights of a jet climbing out of JFK, heading to London or Paris or somewhere beautiful. She wasn't on it. She would never be on it again. Back at the gallery. The night was winding down. The red sold dots were next to every single piece. Jordan Banks stood alone for a moment in front of 1A. The gallery was emptying out. The noise was fading. He remembered the silence of the cabin after the police had dragged him out of the seat. He remembered the feeling of being small. He took a piece of charcoal from his pocket, the same nub he had used on the plane. He walked over to the bottom corner of the massive painting. With a steady hand, he signed his name. Not small, not hidden, but bold, dark, and permanent. Jordan Banks. He capped the charcoal, turned his back on the painting, and walked out the front door into the bright, waiting city. He had a flight to catch in the morning. He was sitting in 1A, and this time, everybody knew his name. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why you never judge a book by its cover, and you certainly never judge a passenger by their hoodie. Jordan Banks went from being treated like a criminal to becoming an icon, proving that true class has nothing to do with the price of your ticket and everything to do with the content of your character. Beatrice and Gregory learned the hard way that when you try to fly above others by pushing them down, you usually end up crashing the hardest. What would you have done if you were in seat 1A? Would you have given up the seat or stood your ground like Jordan? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs a reminder to be kind, and subscribe to the channel for more stories where the good guys win and the entitled get exactly what they deserve. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.